The heart of man is desperately wicked, who can know it? In the heart of a bustling city, where shiny buildings cast long shadows on quiet streets, two men plotted their next big score. Chuka and Jide were more than friends. They were partners in deception. Their latest target, a prime piece of land on the edge of the city, worth millions of naira, perfect for a commercial plaza. Their plan was simple: create convincing fake ownership documents, lure a wealthy but unsuspecting buyer, and vanish after the deal. They found their mark in Mr. Bello, a middle-aged businessman known for buying land and reselling at a profit. He was careful, but the offer was almost too good to resist. The land was being sold at a price far below market value. According to Chuka's smooth talk, the family needed urgent cash. For a medical emergency abroad, Mr. Bello agreed to inspect the land on a Wednesday. Everything looked genuine. The survey beacons were in place. The neighborhood was developing rapidly, and the papers looked official. After the inspection, he collected copies of the documents and submitted them to the land registry office for verification on Thursday morning. That was when Chuka and Jide began to apply pressure. "Sir," Jide said over the phone, feigning urgency, "another buyer is very interested. He's ready to pay immediately. We're only holding it because you came first." Mr. Bello tried to remain calm. He insisted on waiting for confirmation from the registry, but the calls became more frequent. By Monday morning, at exactly 10 o'clock a.m., his phone rang again. "If payment is not made by noon today," Jide said firmly, "the land will be sold to someone else." They insisted on cash, claiming they did not trust bank transfers. The final exchange of documents and payment was fixed at Tasty Restaurant, a fairly good restaurant in town, unknown to Mr. Bello. The restaurant owner, Kunle, was not just a friend of the sellers, but a brother in crime. At the restaurant, everything moved quickly. Mr. Kunle and Chuka counted the cash carefully. Receipts were signed. The documents were handed over, with a sense of relief, mixed with lingering unease. Mr. Bello picked up his bag and stepped outside. Minutes later, just as he reached his car, his phone rang. It was from the land registry. "Mr. Bello," the officer said urgently, "we need to inform you that the documents you submitted are not genuine. The land does not belong to the sellers. Please do not proceed with any transaction." The world seemed to tilt. His heart pounded violently. The money, already paid, without hesitation. Mr. Bello turned and rushed back into Tasty Restaurant. He stormed past the dining area, ignoring the stairs, straight toward the back office, where Chuka, Jide, and Kunle were still seated, about to divide the money. "Where is my money?" he shouted, slamming the door shut behind him. "You people have deceived me." The room exploded into chaos. Chuka tried to calm him down with false reassurances, while Jide moved toward the door. Mr. Bello grabbed at the documents, realizing too late that everything was a lie. Voices rose. Accusations flew. The air became thick with fear and desperation. Then it happened. In the struggle, Mr. Bello was struck violently on the head by Jide. The blow landed hard and sudden. His words faded mid-sentence as his body staggered backward. Within seconds, he collapsed to the floor, motionless. The room fell silent. The wickedness of men, driven by greed and desperation, had crossed a terrible line. For a few seconds, no one moved. Mr. Bello lay sprawled on the cold tiled floor, his briefcase fallen open beside him. A thin line of blood trickled from the side of his head. His chest rose once, then stilled. Chuka's face was drained of color. "What have you done?" he whispered, backing away. I didn't mean to, Jide muttered, his voice shaking. He rushed me. He wouldn't let us leave. Kunle peered through the office door, into the restaurant hall. Laughter and clinking cutlery filled the air. Life going on, unaware. We can't let this turn into murder, he said urgently. We have to think. They locked the office door. Panic took over reason. Water was splashed on Mr. Bellow's face. His name was called repeatedly. There was no response. Fear now ruled the room. The same fear that had driven them into fraud, now trapping them in something far worse. He might still be alive, Chuka said, though his voice lacked conviction. We should take him to the hospital. And explain what? Kunle snapped, that we stole his money and cracked his skull. Silence answered him. Minutes dragged like hours. Then Mr. Bellow groaned faintly. His fingers twitched. Relief flashed across their faces. But it was short-lived. The man was alive. Yes, but unconscious, vulnerable, and now a danger to them. This ends everything, Jide said grimly. If he wakes up and talks, we're finished. Greed hardened into cruelty. The wicked heart, once fed, demanded protection. They moved him into a small storage room behind the office and locked the door. Kunle wiped the blood from the floor. Chuka gathered the scattered papers, stuffing them into a drawer. The cash was split hastily, hands trembling as they counted. Outside, the restaurant bustled on, but by evening, unease crept in. Mr. Bellow had not regained consciousness. His breathing grew shallow. Fear turned into dread. At night, unable to bear it any longer, Kunle unlocked the storage room. Mr. Bellow lay exactly where they had left him, cold, still, and silent. Reality crashed down on them. This was no longer a fraud. This was death, late in the night, when the city had gone quiet, and even guilt seemed to whisper louder. They wrapped Mr. Bellow's body hastily. Fear drove their hands. They dragged him through the back alley and placed him into the trunk of his own car, slamming it shut, as if sealing away their conscience. Chuka and Jide got into Mr. Bellow's car and drove ahead. Kunle followed closely behind, in his personal vehicle. They headed toward an isolated part of town, far from streetlights, far from witnesses, where bushes swallowed sound and secrets alike. There, under the cover of darkness, they pulled the body from the trunk and dumped it into the thick bush. Animals will take care of it, Jide muttered, turning away quickly, unable to look again. But wickedness leaves traces. They did not know. They were being watched. Not far from the road, a hunter, on his way out early, for a night to dawn hunt, had noticed the unusual movement. Suspicious. He slipped into the shadows and watched in silence. He saw 2 cars. He saw hurried movements. He memorized the plate numbers carefully, carving them into his mind. His name was Mr. Okon, unaware. Chuka and Jide drove a few miles farther and abandoned Mr. Bellow's car. They doused it with fuel and set it ablaze. Flames leapt into the night sky, consuming evidence, along with their last illusion of control. They all piled into Kunle's car and drove back toward the city, believing the matter to be buried forever. As soon as the road went silent again, Mr. Okon emerged from hiding. His heart pounded as he approached the bush. He pushed aside the leaves and saw the bagged body, lying still. Carefully, he knelt and checked for a pulse. What he felt made him stagger backward. There was a pulse, low, weak, but unmistakably there. Shock gripped him. This man was still alive, without wasting time. Mr. Ocon reached for his phone and called a trusted friend. His voice shook as he explained what he had found. 30 minutes later, the faint sound of an engine broke the silence of the bush. His friend arrived on a tricycle, breathless and alarmed. Together, they lifted Mr. Bello carefully and placed him into the tricycle. The journey to the nearest hospital was long, 45 minutes of rough roads, fear, and whispered prayers along the way. Mr. Ocon searched desperately for any form of identification. He checked the pockets, the bag, the clothes. Nothing. No wallet. No ID. No phone. Just a man, clinging weakly to life. When they finally arrived at the hospital's emergency unit, chaos greeted them. An accident earlier that evening had flooded the place with victims. Nurses rushed past. Voices overlapped. Stretchers rolled endlessly. They handed Mr. Bello over to a nurse, quickly explaining that they had found him unconscious in the bush and that he was barely breathing. Before questions could be asked, they stepped back. Mr. Ocon's friend grabbed his arm. "If we stay," he warned in a low voice, "this could turn into police statements, investigations, and suspicion. We could become suspects." Fear won. They slipped out of the hospital as quietly as they had come, disappearing into the night. Mr. Bello was now in medical hands, but Mr. Ocon and his friend bolted, determined to avoid police trouble and legal entanglements. Inside the emergency unit, the nurse on duty quickly assessed the unconscious man, with no identification and no relatives present. She recorded him as John Doe. She wrote down every detail she could remember, from Mr. Ocon's brief explanation before he bolted, the location he was found, the time, his condition, and the description of the men and vehicles. As best as Ocon could recall, Mr. Bello was rushed in for urgent care. Doctors worked through the night, stabilizing him, but the damage was severe. By dawn, the verdict was clear. He was alive, but in a coma, suspended in a fragile space between breath and silence. Following protocol, the nurse took clear photographs of his face. The images, along with the limited information recorded, were sent to the police in hopes of identifying him and contacting his relatives. As morning broke, another report came in. A partially burnt car had been discovered along the bushes leading to the northern boundary of the state. The fire had been poorly concealed. The chassis number was still readable. Investigators immediately connected the find to a possible violent crime. While sirens wailed elsewhere in the city, life continued at Tasty Restaurant, quietly, deceptively normal. Ruth, the cleaner, reported for duty as she always did. She was punctual, unnoticed, and thorough. Her routine never changed. She began with the inner office, opening the windows for ventilation. Before mopping the floor, she switched on the light. That was when she saw it. A brown leather wallet lay on the office floor. She paused, frowned, then picked it up. It felt heavy, assuming it belonged to her boss, Mr. Cunley. She slipped it into her pocket for safekeeping, fully intending to hand it over when he arrived for work. She had no idea that the wallet carried more than money. It carried a name, an identity, and the truth that wickedness had tried and failed to erase. By noon, Mr. Cunley called the chef to say he would not be coming in that day, as he had urgent business out of town. Work continued as usual. Ruth carried on with her chores. She swept the dining area, wiped the tables, and helped with service once in a while. As the day went on, she completely forgot about the wallet. Customers came and went, and lunch service was busy. By evening, the restaurant began to slow down. At p.m., she left the restaurant. At the close of her shift, traffic was heavy, and it took nearly an hour before she reached her usual bus stop. As she opened her bag to pay her fare, she saw the brown wallet and froze. She remembered picking it up earlier in the office. She paid her fare, alighted, and stood briefly by the roadside. She called her boss twice, but there was no answer. She then left a voice note, explaining that she had picked up his brown wallet from the office, but had forgotten and mistakenly taken it home with her. She assured him that she would bring it back the next day. After a 20-minute walk, she got home. Her home was a modest, self-contained room in a small compound shared with other tenants. It was a small space with a small television, a twin bed pushed against the wall, and a little wardrobe by the door. She bathed, ate lightly, and rested. By p.m., she decided to watch a recap of the day's news. As soon as the news channel came on, her heart skipped. Staring back at her from the screen was a picture of Mr. Bello. Ruth stood still in the dimly lit room, the hum of the television filling the silence. The news anchor's voice continued, but she barely heard it anymore. Her eyes were fixed on the screen. Mr. Bello. The picture was unmistakable. The caption below read, "Businessman declared missing." The reporter explained that his wife had reported him missing. After he failed to return home the previous night, his phone had been switched off. His car had not been found. The police were asking for information. Ruth's heart pounded so loudly. She feared it might drown out the television. Memories she had pushed aside suddenly rushed back with frightening clarity. She remembered that afternoon at the restaurant. Mr. Conley had been in his inner office with his friends, Chuka and Jide. She had served them drinks and pepper soup earlier. They were relaxed, laughing in low tones. Later, the chef had called her again and told her there was a new guest. When she entered the office, she saw him, Mr. Bello, sitting across from the three men. There was an open box of money on the table, bundles of cash stacked neatly. The others were counting quickly, their hands moving with urgency. Mr. Bello was focused, flipping through documents and signing where he was directed. She remembered how tense the room felt. She had offered him a drink, but he waved it away. "I'm in a hurry," he said politely. "Just water, please." She brought the bottle of water. As she placed it on the table, she noticed how Mr. Bello glanced at the documents one last time. Then she was dismissed. Shortly after, the chef sent her on an errand to deliver some orders outside the restaurant. That was the last time she saw him. Now, sitting alone in her small room, Ruth slowly reached for her handbag. Her fingers trembled as she pulled out the brown leather wallet. She opened it. Inside was an identity card, Mr. Bello's name, his photograph, a picture of his wife and two children, a boy and a girl, his contact number. Her knees weakened, and she sank onto the edge of the bed. The truth hit her like a blow. The wallet had not belonged to Mr. Conley. It belonged to the man now declared missing. The same man who had been in that office, the same office where she had found the wallet. On the floor that morning, her mind raced. Fear clawed at her chest. She thought of the stories she had heard, how witnesses became suspects, how poor people got trapped in cases they didn't understand. She thought of her small room, her fragile life, her quiet routine, her poor mother back in the village. She was an only child, but she was not a child. She had seen and heard things at the restaurant. To know that her boss and his friends were dangerous men. She only worked there to survive, and had minded her business. making sure to avoid any trouble. Yet trouble had found her. She looked back at the television. Mr. Bellow's wife was now on the screen, her voice breaking as she pleaded for help. Ruth felt tears well up in her eyes. She opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out. Her throat felt tight, and her hands trembled as she stared at the wallet on the table. Then another thought struck her, sharp and sudden. The calls, and the voice note she had sent to Cunley. Once he listened to it, he would know that she had the wallet. He would know that she had been in the office and had seen something, or at least suspected something. To make matters worse, he knew where she lived. Fear settled heavily in her chest. The small room suddenly felt even smaller. Every sound from the compound outside made her flinch. She locked her door and sat on the edge of the bed, listening, her mind racing through possibilities. She replayed that day in her head. The office, the money on the table, the documents, the tension in the room. None of it felt random anymore. The missing man on the screen, the wallet in her possession, and the unanswered calls all seemed to connect in ways she did not yet fully understand. Ruth remained seated in the dim light, clutching her phone, waiting, afraid of what the night might bring. She decided to run to Abuja for a fresh start. She had a cousin whom she had not seen in 4 years. She sent a message immediately for her cousin to send her address. She would like to visit. Fear pushed her faster than reason. She had some money with her and planned to stop at the ATM in the bus park to withdraw more for the journey. Inside the wallet were 20,000 naira and about $500, but she resolved not to touch it. She decided she would present the wallet to the authorities only when she was accompanied by someone she could trust. Moving quickly, she packed a medium-sized box and a backpack with only the essentials: clothes, toiletries, her documents, and her phone charger. By p.m., she was ready. She switched off the lights, took one last look around the room, and stepped outside. Her plan was to sleep at the park and catch the first bus in the morning. She slipped out of the compound quietly, careful not to draw attention to herself. Once on the road, she switched off her phone and walked to the road. She was afraid of being attacked at night by Mr. Cunley. The journey to the park took about 45 minutes and was uneventful. Ruth kept her head down and walked steadily. Alert button hindered. She arrived at the park just around midnight. The park was very busy. Loaders moved quickly, loading trucks and buses, while others unloaded passengers from vehicles that had just arrived. The terminal was filled with people, some waiting to be picked up by relatives, others seated with their bags, preparing for long journeys. Taxis moved in and out of the park, their headlights cutting through the night as drivers called out destinations. Ruth joined the queue for the first bus heading to Abuja and booked her ticket. Afterward, she found an empty seat, placed her box beside her, held her backpack close, and settled in, hoping to catch some sleep while she waited for departure. Cunley had a late night with his guys, celebrating the millions they had stolen. He got home from the club at about 4 a.m., exhausted but satisfied, and fell asleep almost immediately. By 6 a.m., he woke briefly to use the restroom. He intended to sleep late into the day and go to his restaurant in the evening. After using the restroom, he decided to check his messages before going back to sleep. As he scrolled through his phone, he saw it. There were 2 missed calls from Ruth. That was strange. He noticed a voice note on WhatsApp and, out of curiosity, clicked play. He listened. At first it did not register. Then it hit him like a sack of potatoes. He remembered the brown wallet. He remembered complimenting Bello on it, and even asking where he had purchased it. The pieces began to fall into place. Frantically, he dialed her number. It was switched off. By now, he was fully awake. All traces of sleep had vanished, replaced by a deep, creeping dread. He dressed immediately, grabbed his keys, and ran to his car. Within minutes, he was on the road, driving fast, hoping to catch her at home. The journey took about 25 minutes. There was no traffic, as he was driving against the usual morning flow. Inside the car, he called Jide. Jide answered sleepily, his voice thick with drowsiness. But the moment Kunle explained what he had heard, Jide became fully awake. "What do we do about her?" Jide asked, his tone sharp now. "I'll ask the boys to come and pick her up as soon as I get there," Kunle replied. "It will depend on how much she knows." There was a brief pause. "Okay," Jide said. "I'll head to the restaurant with Chuka." Kunle ended the call and pressed harder on the accelerator, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. On the other side of town, Ruth's bus left the park by 5 a.m. As the vehicle pulled out of the terminal, she breathed a long sigh of relief, though uncertainty still lay ahead. She was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. Within minutes of the journey, sleep overtook her, and she slept through most of the way. Kunle arrived at the compound around 6:30 a.m. He parked his car opposite the gate and stepped out. He knew the compound well. He had dropped Ruth off at the gate before, even though he had never entered her room. He walked into the compound and knocked on the main door. There was no answer. He moved toward the boys' quarters behind the building and knocked again. Still no response. The compound was unusually quiet. It appeared everyone had already left for work. He called her number repeatedly, but there was no response. Just then, a call came in from Jide. They were at the restaurant, and it was still closed. Kunle decided to wait at the house for a while Jide and Chuka kept watch at the restaurant. They agreed to inform him immediately. If she showed up for work, they were hoping that would be the case, so they could snatch her. Before other staff and customers began to arrive for the day, it was Ninya M. Ruth had not shown up for work. There were no calls, and no explanation. Kunle returned to the restaurant a few minutes later. By then, the three men were in full panic mode. The only explanation they could come up with was that Ruth knew. Mr. Bello had last been seen in the office with them. She had seen the money, and she had the wallet. Kunle began making frantic calls to some street thugs, instructing them to watch the compound and inform him immediately if Ruth was seen there. By this time, Mr. Bello's wife had also filed a missing persons report at the police station, submitting his photograph and personal details. The police coordinated with another unit that had received a report from the hospital about an unidentified unconscious man, as well as information earlier provided by the hunter. As the details were compared, it became clear that the two cases were connected. The discovery of Mr. Bello's burnt car, several kilometers away from the location where the hunter said he had found him, raised serious questions. The case was reclassified as attempted murder. As Mr. Bello remained in a coma, his wife was informed and reunited with her husband at the hospital. It later emerged that Mr. Bello was a cousin of the state governor. With that revelation, the case was immediately given top priority by the police. The 9 a.m. news carried a breaking report. The police announced that they were investigating the attempted murder of Mr. Bello, who was brought in by an unidentified witness, and were further seeking any information that would lead to the capture of the person or persons involved. They urged anyone with useful details to come forward to assist in solving the case. The message was circulated on social media. It was a cool day, with pleasant weather. But the three men sat in Cunley's office, sweating like Christmas chickens. The latest culprit was the recap of the 9 a.m. news. Mr. Bello was alive. He was in the hospital. Panic spread through the room. What were they going to do now? He had probably spoken to the police already. Every second felt like a countdown. Without another word, the gathering broke up immediately. Each of them rushed out, intent on going home to pack and disappear. Ruth was now a problem, but she was no longer the only one. Meanwhile, Ruth was still on her journey, asleep, and unaware of the chaos unfolding behind her. Then it happened. A loud bang. The bus swerved violently. There were numerous somersaults. Ruth blacked out. There had been an accident. Sometimes, it's not the plan that destroys everything, it's the unexpected, the moment no one prepares for, the turn no one sees coming. And just when it all seems finished, something else begins that same night. On a quiet road, Ruth's life changed in an instant, but one question remains: did she survive? Watch out for part 2, coming same time next week.